Anthony Romeo from WiseUP. As promised, we're talking with Shen Milson and Wilke's principal, Bob McFarlane. For those of you who missed our first episode, shame on you. In any case, Bob provided our listeners on where data centers started and how they evolved. One takeaway, cat videos consume an enormous amount of power. Have a listen to part 2 of WiseUP as Bob explains from his professional experience where he sees the data center practices going. Bonus round, roughly about how much power does an email use? Be sure to comment, like, and share on our social media channels. And stream WiseUP wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We cannot thank you enough for your likes, comments, and shares. I'm Anthony Romeo. This is WiseUP, and do check us out when you get a chance, because the stuff above the ceiling and behind the walls matters. What's your take?
Well, the take is you're absolutely right. It's growing by leaps and bounds, and that's partly because we're demanding it. We are demanding faster and faster, easier and easier access to more and more and more communications ability and data. Something people don't realize. When you send an email, the average email uses 5 watts of power. By the time it goes through all of the different data centers that it passes through, jumping from place to place for you to send that email across the country or across the world, on average, it's using 5 watts of power.
You mean it's not magic?
No, multiply that out. Storing videos is even worse. And in a presentation I've done on the energy efficiency standard, I've kind of jokingly referred to data centers being more important than storing people's cat pictures. I have no objection to cats, but
I'm allergic. I don't care.
but the fact is that storing all of these photographs, storing all of these videos, which are far, far, far worse, is using enormous amounts of electricity. Enormous amounts. And this is where we're going to run into a problem. The industry has been able to, year after year, produce servers with higher processing power, faster processing speeds that also use less energy. That's coming to an end. The technology has been pushed to the point where it can't go any further. And I'm lucky enough to sit in committees with people who are at levels so far beyond me in the know. They're in touch with the highest levels of people who are developing the latest things. And even though they can't talk about many of those things that are coming, they can tell you in general what is not happening or what is coming.
Right.
And what is not coming is the ability to make another quantum leap in accomplishing huge amounts of processing without using much electricity. That occurred many years ago when a new transistor technology was developed, but nothing is on the horizon. Lots of things have been talked about, but according to the people in the know, nothing's on the horizon. So we're getting to the point where we somehow or other have to generate a lot more electricity to support these data centers. The other problem is water. All that electricity produces heat, enormous amounts of heat.
Right.
And getting rid of it requires big air conditioning systems. This is why ASHRAE TC 9.9 developed new approaches using higher temperatures. When I mentioned my first computer room at Colorado State University when I was a student, that it was like a refrigerator. Well, today we are pushing people to use higher inlet temperatures to the equipment. For a long time, we were at 55 degrees Fahrenheit. People wore jackets and sweaters in computer rooms.
Right.
Today, we're pushing for temperatures approaching 80 degrees. It's a big difference.
To reduce the power consumption.
to reduce the power consumption.
Right.
Yes.
So what's your take on then like Microsoft or Google, who in recent years they've been, basically building these container data centers and then dropping them into the sea?
There are lots of things being looked at in order to solve this cooling problem. It doesn't solve the power problem. I mean, if we reduce the amount of cooling, the cooling power is significant compared to the processing power. So we can reduce the power consumption, but we're still using all this computing. So regardless of what they're doing, if they're cooling them with seawater, which is a real problem that's being researched right now with regard to corrosion,
Right.
No matter what we're trying to do, it's going to take electricity and a lot of it. We are trying to do more things air cooled. We're trying to do more things with what's called free cooling, which means using the outside air. This is one of the reasons we raised the temperature limits, and manufacturers started building equipment that could handle higher temperatures. But we are also going more to liquid cooling. We can't cool with air anymore. The temperatures are just too high. We have to maintain the temperatures of the processors inside those computers at a certain level, or they burn themselves up. These things are extremely sensitive. So if we can't maintain cooling, those things are either going to burn up, or they now contain hundreds of sensors, so that if the temperature rises too much too quickly, they shut themselves down for self-preservation. They're just too expensive to let them, just destroy
Right.
themselves. So everything that's happening is a push toward reducing energy consumption and managing to reduce the cooling loads and to reduce the amount of water that's needed to cool. These are the big pushes today. The other thing that we're pushing for is heat reclaim. We're generating so much heat in these data centers, we're trying to reclaim it and use it to heat the building or something. One way or another, we've got to be more efficient. And the more that we as users demand more access to technology, more processing power, faster processing speeds, when we get upset that the computer doesn't respond to us instantly,
Right.
what we're really saying is we want a faster computer behind what we're doing. And if you double the increase in processing speed without doing anything else, you will multiply the power consumption by 8. So
Well, you were saying when you sent an email before, an email itself takes 5 watts, you said?
on average, across
On
the
average.
entire network, you've consumed 5 watts of power.
Wow.
So how many emails do you send a day?
A lot.
Okay. How much power are you using? And then multiply that by everybody in the world.
Some people that are listening to this episode, they're saying they want to do a green initiative, so they're going to work less and send less emails because they want to reduce their carbon footprint.
Well, and as we know, there's a lot of greenwashing going on too. Things that are supposed to be green, but in reality, they're really not.
Oh yeah. That's a whole other show that I can go on and on and on and on.
Well, Google got caught on that when they were pushing a new data center, I can't remember where, and said they were going to run it on solar. Nobody succeeded in doing that yet. And it turned out that they were running the building offices on solar, but the power for their data center, which was the majority, was going to come from a plant using coal-fired generators. So you got to be careful what you put out there.
That was it. Benjamin Franklin that said moderation at all. I mean, that's what it boils down to. We're looking at, driving everything into one area is going to upset Mother Earth. That's bottom line. Being in the United States Navy, I've been on nuclear powered vessels, and those ran for 25 plus years without any refurbish, versus the old diesel engines, so there is alternative energies that we've known, that we've been speaking about in previous episodes, as well as on other articles that I've read, that are driving, whether you say solar, seawater for cooling, but nuclear and other types of energies that are out there, hydrostatic and wind turbine. There's so many things that in the future, I hope there is somebody that brings the reins in. And like you were saying about the board that you sit on, it's not just about getting a check for designing a project. You're meeting with a collective group of people that care about the industry and are hoping to better it for the next generation. And it's very important that we understand the flaws that we make. The accidents that happen today have consequences tomorrow, right? And all too often people don't care. And we get the wool pulled over our eyes as society. It has nothing to do with the United States of America. It's globally. We're a global economy. Whether it be wherever part of the world you live in, you're going to need a network infrastructure to support your needs, whether it be the day-to-day function or cat videos, as Bob pointed out before. I was privileged to work with another consultant firm several years ago, and we did a healthcare summit, and healthcare talked about all the digital influence within the data center, all the different applications that they were using to make the hospital experience a lot more easier to from the patient experience, improving the patient's experience. I forget what the survey is, but every time you go into a hospital, you're getting a survey tablet now, and they'll say, what was your experience like? And they'll have a series of questions. Well, going back several years ago, this was 5 or 6 now, and we conducted this seminar with folks from hospital special surgery in New York City, and was it Cornell? No, it was New York Presbyterian. I'm sorry, and
which is associated with Weill Cornell.
Well, right, it's the same, but the title for the person that we had was on the Presbyterian. Nonetheless, they were talking about, in the first half of the conference, about all these wonderful things that they're bringing to help create a better patient experience. And the second half of that conference, rather, we had cybersecurity expert, the FBI head of cybersecurity task force, talking about you're providing all these doors and windows, whether you like it or not. So when it comes to the network and the safety of HIPAA laws and just patient confidentiality overall, and not to mention the billions of dollars that transactions that happen through the medical field, you're kind of opening a can of worms. But what I look back at, it's only 5-6 years ago, and all the people that were at the hospital that were speaking about improving the patient's experience, they were very apprehensive when it came to telemedicine. And they were basically doing, no way, that's not going to be needed. We're going to put satellite campuses all over the place, so that if you want to be treated by Weill Cornell, New York Presbyterian, and you live in far off place, we'll have a satellite office for you. We're not going to talk to you on the video screen and diagnose you. And then this thing called COVID comes into play, 3 years ago, and that changed the world, right? I I was actually at my own annual physical with my doctor, and I was asking him from, my business perspective, like from an infrastructure, I said, how many telehealth calls are you doing now? And he's like, oh my God. He says, I never had time before, but now I have no time.
Mhm.
And then, so he says, I see the benefits of it, but you have people scheduling appointments just to say, hey, what's this on my head? Or what does this feel like? And more so than ever before, because they have that accessibility, but not knowing that there has to be security parameters built into this to help combat all the evil people that are out there. So in a long way about getting around to you, from a data center practice that you were talking about from a power side, what things are best practices from a security standpoint in the data center from your professional opinion?
Well, cybersecurity is not my area, and it's not our firm's area.
Right. No.
We have a practice in physical security,
Physical.
emphasize that we do not deal in cybersecurity. That is such a specialization. And frankly, I can't imagine how the people in it sleep at night, because they cannot plug all the holes.
Right.
When something goes wrong, naturally they're to blame because they didn't manage to plug all the holes. It's got to be the most impossible profession.
Well, Bob, you had mentioned in the beginning of this talk, you were saying how it's the fundamental. So removing the cybersecurity aspect from the conversation altogether, the physical applications or the design that you implement from a data center, what are some of the things that you think help combat some of the challenges that we face by adding telehealth and all these other things into the data center world nowadays?
Well, one thing that we do as part of the data center design practice and process is to recommend and specify packages called DCIM or DCIM in the industry, Data Center Infrastructure Management. These are software packages, and they have all sorts of capabilities. But I think one of the best capabilities today, from the standpoint you're discussing right now, is that they can monitor all of your hardware, as well as monitoring the software industry, and alert you when a server has not been updated with the latest patch. Most of the cybersecurity problems, the real intrusions and exposures of data with financial institutions in particular, have been because updates were not done. Now, when you have thousands of devices, doing all those updates, yes, updates can be pushed to a lot of them simultaneously, but updating all those devices and keeping track of it can be a problem. People are so overloaded, and there just aren't enough real computer experts out there. When we're talking about the operations people in data centers, they are so specialized. They specialize in certain aspects of the network, certain operating systems, certain this, certain that. There aren't enough of them to go around.
Right.
So the result is you're going to have holes. And anything you can do to automate it, and AI, artificial intelligence, is becoming an important aspect of these data center infrastructure or DCIM packages, to make sure that everything you have is as up to date as possible. That is becoming very important. So people who say, well, it's an expensive package, it's expensive stuff, I can't afford to invest in it, they can't afford not to.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
That's usually the case, right? Until something happens, then everybody thinks to do it.
And the same thing is true for many other aspects of the data center itself. If people are looking at co-hosting sites, if they're looking at cloud processing centers and who they want to contract with, they should be looking at a number of different things. You mentioned reliability, and you specifically said redundancy. One of the biggest problems we have today is people designing data centers basically the way they designed them 30 years ago. They're not up to date. They don't realize how complex these things have gotten. They have just gone completely into the stratosphere in terms of the amount of knowledge you need. And I've walked into too many data centers and done analyses where millions of dollars have been spent on redundant hardware, redundant equipment. But the person who designed it has left flaws in the designs where that redundant equipment will be useless when it's actually needed.
Right.
It's terribly unfortunate, but it requires such a degree of specialization today to design these facilities correctly. The other one is fire protection. Data center fires are rare, but when they occur, they're absolutely devastating. So you've got really two things here. One is, if you're going to spend all this money on redundancy, make sure it works. It has to be designed properly. It has to be tested properly. It has to be looked at by people who are really experts in mission critical design, which is not normal design by any stretch of the imagination. And second, you just can't pretend that data center fires are rare, therefore I don't have to spend the money for true protection. We have systems today that are called aspirating smoke detection systems. They sample the air. They can detect the start of a fire way before any fire protection system activates. And you can go in with handheld extinguishers and solve the problem and stop it
before it gets out of hand.
Before it gets out of hand.
Brilliant.
These systems are cheap. I mean, I did one data center. It wasn't a huge one, but it was big enough. And that whole system cost $5,000.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing of just like proper fire stopping.
Yeah.
You know,
in
containment. I mean, it's in the big scheme of things, when you're doing an entire data center, what's the cost of a quality, you know, STI sleeve or some putty that they make? You know,
That's right.
It's pennies in comparison to what would be at stake, what will be lost if not properly done. You know, just taking that extra step. It's not even an extra step. It's frankly, it's
code.
It's code, right? And
it's
but
a requirement.
all too often, at least I've walked into IDFs, MDFs, and data centers in my short career, and I said, it's not grounded, it's not bounded, it's not properly fire stopped, it has poor cable management, so it's reducing airflow, it's creating more heat, it's loading power, and it's yada yada, and on and on and on and on and on and on it goes.
You've hit on so many of them. And people think grounding is simple. It's not. We're not talking about National Electric Code grounding requirements for safety. We're talking about grounding for really high-speed networks. And high-speed signals don't go around corners. They'll go along the surfaces of the wires. So you can't have sharp bends. And the electricians like to make these nice, pretty sharp bends in the grounding system, and they might as well not waste the money on the copper. Every little detail after detail counts. And it's all to support all of that computing power and all that huge amount of investment in computing equipment and the even more valuable data. That data value is you can't put a number on it.
Well, back to the fundamentals, right, Bob?
Yeah, back to fundamentals.
So back to the fundamentals on the data center. I'm talking with Bob McFarlane from Shen Milson Wilke. As he pointed out, there's too many data centers, particularly small ones, that are still designed and operated much as they were 30 plus years ago. And so it's just getting down to the basics, you know, and understanding you can't cut corners. Cutting corners could cost many, many, many dollars, or worse than that, lives. So you're listening again to Anthony Romeo Wise Up. Could be streamed on however you stream. We thank you for your time and listening to our show. As again, it's a 5-star show rated. To check us out however you stream your podcast. Bob, one last question for you before I let you go, get back to doing one of the 37 jobs you do in a day.
This is going to be the ringer question, right?
What do you see? Like I'm sitting down and listening to you for the last 50 minutes, whatever, and you're telling me when you started out, the speeds were X. So that was quite a while ago. In the next several decades, what do you think we are going to anticipate? What do you think is going to be on the horizon?
Take out the crystal ball, huh?
Yeah, take out the crystal ball for this one.
Well, speeds are going to keep going up.
Right.
And thankfully they can. They can because most everything today is fiber optics. And fiber optics are at the speed of light. And as far as we know right now, we can't exceed that. So until we get up to those kind of speeds, the problem is we can't switch the data as fast as the fiber optics can transmit it. So we're going to keep trying to find ways to switch that data faster. And it's all a matter of switching. This is a matter of switching between ones and zeros as fast as you can. That's where data speeds occur. So we can transmit it if you can provide it.
Right.
The problem is that we still can't provide it, but we keep getting faster and faster and faster.
And as we continue to go faster, and we will go faster, I agree with you 100%. It's still going to be down to the basics.
Well,
right?
The thing that has been on the horizon supposedly for, I don't know, I'm going to say 25 or 30 years that I've been hearing about it and hearing people talk about it. And someday I'm sure it's going to occur. And that is a biometric or atomic level operation of some kind. Something is going to replace the transistor. We are going to find some genius, maybe working in his garage right now,
right,
is going to figure out a way to deal with this stuff the same way that we deal with it in our own bodies. The brain is unbelievable. We haven't been able to duplicate it yet.
It's an amazing thing, the human brain.
Someday, and I have to say, quite frankly, I find it a little scary. If we can actually recreate the brain, so to speak, and use it as a processor and storage system for data. You talk about the bad actors out there. I hate to think, what can actually happen. I'm not sure we'll ever figure out how to control people. And when we put more power in their hands, they always seem to find a way to use it wrongly. But one way or another, we're not going to solve today's demand for data, today's demand for speed, today's demand for storage, the same way that we're solving it today. We keep getting better and better. But solid state storage, we thought would take over spinning disks. Well, in many ways it has. But we have managed to go to very, very high density spinning disks. They are so high density that too much vibration causes them to fail. So now we're in data centers, we're dealing with shock absorbing cabinets. And if a gas fire suppression system goes off, the noise level from that fire suppression discharge destroys those disks. And, beyond terabytes of data along with it. So everything that we develop brings with it a new problem.
Right.
But we could only, we keep saying, well, we can't get it any faster. We can't get it any more dense. We are to the point with nanoelectronics for computer chips where we can't get the computer chips any smaller. We're to the point where the conductors are so small that you can't get them any closer together. Nanoelectronics just, has pushed us to the limits. So somebody's going to have to come up with something new, something different. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know if it'll be in my remaining lifetime. But
that's why you got to pay it forward, right? So
it'll either happen or we'll hit a brick wall.
Exactly. So again, Bob McFarlane, folks, principal at Shen Milson Wilke, international integrated technologies consulting firm with 5 interrelated disciplines. He was today focused and talking about his experience within the data center, but if you are in need of some assistance from a design application in acoustics, audio visual, multimedia, physical security, medical equipment planning, do feel free to reach out to SMW, as they have a lengthy experience, not just with Bob, many great people there. Bob, I thank you so much again for joining us on WiseUP, and I look forward to meeting you in person one of these days.
That would be very nice. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, from all of us at WiseUP, we thank you all again for listening. However you stream, again, thank you. Feel free to comment on us on our social media pages. We'd love to hear any feedback that you have for our guests today and or previous guests. So from Anthony Romeo, WiseUP, thank you all.